Okay. And yeah, so what I read was like there were 5 or 6 major highways throughout the land, and there was of course small roads, but Galilee happened to be, most of it was part of this big highway, which was from Damascus, like Damascus. It linked Galilee, or maybe the Palestine to the outside world from the west, the link to the east. So you imagine like somewhere here, that part Damascus and other parts. So there's a straight line that link goes here. It's not showing the roads, and then it goes up till Ptolemy. So it goes up to the coast, and so that is why people in Galilee, it's like also what we do not, that we get only through history. So there were 24 sort of schools of rabbis or the temple priests. So they used to gather from these 24 places, and each time they had to serve at the temple. Galilee was part of, or maybe Nazareth was part of those things where they gathered. And then that is why they also had influx of the spiritual people and gatherings there. And all throughout, so there were Greeks, there were Romans, there were travelers from the rest of the world, and Galileans, like they had plenty. And the rabbis divided it into regions like Upper Galilee and Lower Galilee, and it had like the coastal regions. So they had fish they used to export, and then there were like a land full of olives, and there was export. So they compared it like industrial towns how we have, and there is a lot of settlement around. So population was dense, and also like they were rich. So there was this saying, they said, according to this is not what I am saying, it's all according to the book that I've read. Yeah, and people, they said it is easy to raise an olive grove in Galilee than to raise a child in Jerusalem. So that is what they said. And basically the land was plenty, and people were more open in Galilee. And they said that is why when Jesus preached the gospel in Galilee and in areas, and the miracles were performed in Cana and other places in Galilee, the region. That was the best place, because if it's there are travelers all around because of this big highway, the great road. And it's possible to reach from to other parts of Palestine, like Judea and other places, and also from to the other parts of the world. It will go to the west because people are traveling and all. And by nature, Galileans were like always opposed to the Romans, and there were certain verses also where we see like Jesus is saying some people, he was informed in one of the parts in I think in Luke, where he's informed that Romans have killed some Galileans. So then Jesus says, do you think that you are more holy than them, or they were more sinners like you unless you repent? So that, and other parts also, like Galileans are rebelling. When in Acts also, wait, let me quote that exact verse, I highlighted it today. Uh, yeah, when the apostles were opposed, then somebody says, there was like Acts 5:37. After a time of the consensus, there was Judas of Galilee. He got people to follow him, but he was killed too, and all his followers were scattered. So they're thinking like that this current thing, what the Acts are doing, maybe something like that. So basically, Galileans were like considered hot-blooded and always in rebellion against the Roman Empire. Now, let me go to the next map. I'm not able to exit it. Okay. Yeah. So what I was explaining, this thing which you see, told me that is called acre in some places. It's called acro in some places. That is the part, that coastal region, and those road that traverse. And Decapolis, of course, also at the time when Jesus preached. This is all basically 10 heathen cities. and most of the time like the rabbis considered them very holy, and they say we are in Jerusalem. But let it be known that most of these parts, there were heathen practices, the cities, all the names, even Samaria, some gods and all, everything had their local deities. And they were living side by side with people who were all heathens, and they had their deities and other practices. So let me stop sharing that. And why I was saying that is that will help us understand partly what was how difficult it would have been for the Jews to accept that the gospel is going to other places and other people will be part of their culture, what they considered was their culture. And now a little bit of history about Samaria. When Samaria, this I read like in wiki, when the Romans took over the Holy Land in around 135 BC, or what, yeah. So that time the Samaritans refused to identify themselves with the Jews, to find favor with them. So already there was acrimony. And then this book, and it says, I think, who's that? Josephus. Josephus and other historians, they are like, Josephus is recounting an incident where during one of the feast of Passover, the Samaritans had strewn some bones in the temple to defile it. So it's like that sort of acrimony. And why I explained the highway and things, there was a highway number 4, they said, which linked Jerusalem via Samaria, and they could directly go to Galilee. But the Jews, they so much was the hatred that they preferred to go around, like towards the corner of Jordan and Bethany and those side. They would take that road which was infested by robbers and highwaymen, instead of going to Samaria. So that was the sort of hatred. And now the Samaritans also had their own Torah. There was a Samaritan Torah also. And since it was part of the northern kingdom, they considered themselves the owners of the real Jewish legacy and all that, and the real Abrahamic descendants, and whatever there was their temple. And then one of the emperors destroyed it, and then they started worshipping the ruins and stuff. But so both of them like had this sort of a sectarianism thing. The other thing was degrees of holiness. So Jerusalem, of course, was considered very holy, and then there was Judea and Galileans, like I've explained how they used to consider them like very materialistic, and they used to hate them. So it's like town people hating their country brethren. So that sort of thing was there. And then so this is the Holy Land. Then there is Holy Land, and there is a sort of a outer band, which is like Syria. So Syria is part of those places which like David had acquired, and it include other countries that were captured. So Syria is not the Syria, the region itself, but places around which were part of the Syrian Empire. So that's considered a little bit like what do I say, more acceptable than the rest of the world. And then there is rest of the world, and which is like starts with Antioch. So this book was saying that all that is before Antioch was sort of maybe considered, like part of Palestine, or could be considered. But since when Antioch starts and its walls and all that was considered like outside and totally unacceptable and untouchable, and so heathen. So then it quoted that words where Jesus says, no, dust of the when you go and preach the gospel, and then they don't accept, then even remove the dust of your feet. So that is what they used to do. Even the dust of heathen lands, like which is not part of the Holy Land, and the Syria and other places, and those places that were conquered by David and were supposed to give tithe and bring offerings. So other than that, everything was heathen. And even if the dust of such lands used to enter, that was considered unholy. And now one more, I forgot one part to highlight in the map. Let me share it again. So this is the division during Jesus' time of how. So you see what parts were ruled. So the blue part is ruled by Herod Archelaus. and these are all sons of the older, the Herod one. And so this part was ruled by Herod Archelaus, and then later it was ruled by the Roman procurators. So yeah, like Roman governor Pontius Pilate, and this purple part was like ruled by Herod Antipas, and then this was ruled by Philip. So yeah, these are all part of the Holy Land. And yeah, we already know that like this Philip is the one whose wife Herod took away, and then all that. So yeah, now let me begin how the gospel is spreading, and what the article says. So let me stop sharing the screen, because that's what I've highlighted from the book. um, so yeah, as I showed in the map, so the persecuted believers were driven out of Jerusalem after Stephen's martyrdom, and it ended with the church being established in Antioch in Syria. So as I've already explained that until that part, Syria was like sort of acceptable, and the outer fringes of Palestine. And then so what we see here, the article is saying, from a rather rural movement of small communities, now it's spreading to a cosmopolitan center of Antioch. And Antioch was the third largest city in the Greco-Roman world, after Rome and Alexandria. So of course Rome, because it's the capital, and Alexandria, and this is the third largest city in the Greco-Roman world. And how, why this is important now? Yeah, so these are all the now the coastal regions. This is all scattered around the coast as in the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, because Mediterranean Sea is on the what do you say, the west, and these are all lying on the edges of all these cities where the gospel is being preached. So now it's broken down: religious, social, and ethnic barriers, which we've briefly discussed, and now people on the fringes of Judaism, including Gentiles. So please note that the section that we are dealing with now is not so far it's not reached the rest. It's not like what is considered the rest of the world, or the outer world. It's still people on the fringes of Judaism that are being considered here. And yeah, like we all know that Christians, like now they have their identity when it reaches Antioch. This is when they are called Christians, and it's no longer the followers of the way, or like they said, it's a sect of Nazarenes who are stirring up some trouble. So that is what has happened. And now this section is also dealing with the ministry of Philip as the evangelist, who's going to Samaria and Judea, and the conversion of Paul, when we see, and his ministry in Tarsus and Damascus. And then Peter, how he travels, and John along with him to Samaria. And then also he travels alone to Joppa, Lydda, and Caesarea. And then a dispersion of other Hellenists to the regions of Phoenicia, Cyprus, Cyrene, and Antioch. So all this, the article is saying, took place between a period of 12 to 13 years. So now it's explaining the ministry of Philip. So Philip, as we see, like Stephen, was the seventh who distributed food to the Hellenistic widows. And the net result of Philip's ministry was that many Samaritans believed, and they were baptized in the name of Jesus. That is in Acts 8:12. So I think I should start sharing the presentation again, maybe, so that we have the right maps everywhere. Okay. Yeah, so like I said, oh, sorry. Can I go back? Okay, so like we see all these are Judea, Samaria, and all those places, even Antioch. This is all around what they call the Great Sea or the Mediterranean Sea. So it's spreading along those coastal lines, and that's what the article is also saying: Judea, Samaria, Galilee, and the coastal regions. So now if we move on to the next, which is the ministry of Philip. So yeah, and what is it saying? I'm not covering, I'm just paraphrasing what all is being written about Philip's ministry. So so you see the region just above, like north of Judea is Samaria. So as a result of Philip's ministry there, many people are believing, and they are baptized. So and then Peter and John have come, and then the purpose, this article is saying, of Luke is not to intend, see, like we read in the articles, we cannot make patterns out of these things, and it's not that he's implying that the Holy Spirit can be transmitted by some rites of confirmation by the apostles. This is just that maybe he wants to highlight or link this baby church to the mother church in Jerusalem. And it's not implying that to receive the Holy Spirit or the apostles need to be there. And now Luke, like in the general way that he gives summary, he's saying that they proclaim the good news to many villages of the Samaritans, while like they've laid hands on the Samaritans, and the Holy Spirit has come down. So Peter and John, while returning, they're preaching to the other villages in Samaria. So now we know that the gospel has spread to different parts of Samaria. Now the next part is where another part it's saying of Philip's ministry is on the wilderness road between Jerusalem and Gaza, and the ancient city and Gaza. Gaza is an ancient city near the coast of the southern border of Judea. So you can see it from the map, the southern coast of Judea, there is Gaza, and that desert road, like from Jerusalem, one has to go down the desert road to Gaza, and then that it's written below to Egypt and Ethiopia. So that is where he's meeting this Ethiopian eunuch. And this is probably a God-fearer, the article says, who's using this opportunity. Maybe he's like, because he's the queen's person. So he maybe used this opportunity or trip for a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. But and they're saying that it's very expensive to have a copy of Old Testament, at least the book of Isaiah. But so because it's very rare and expensive. So then what happens is he starts explaining Isaiah 53, 7, 8 Christologically. So he brings in Jesus as the Messiah there, and he proclaims the good news and the necessity of water baptism. And then after that, he is swept off to the city of Azotus. So that also we see, like straight in line above, on the coastal line only, above Gaza is Azotus. And and then he continued to preach, the line is the essay, preach to the towns of the regions between Azotus and his final steps to Caesarea. So that straight line which is going up and up, it's like the gospel is being preached along all those lines until he reached Caesarea. Now, one point to be noted is for those times that Luke may not have a clear idea about the geographical relationships between Galilee, Samaria, and Judea, because those times people did not have access to maps publicly, and only military and political leaders had those, which were produced, and they were guarded properly. So Luke is more concerned with a clear pattern than exact geographical regions. So we should also not, when we read all this or this big article, and though it says geographical expansion, we do not need to burden ourselves with too many, where exactly what, how many miles and stuff. Purpose is to just tell what all regions were being covered. And then why he uses the story of Philip is not just the transition from Jews to Gentile, and it's before even the conversion of Saul takes place, and then his ministry to the Gentiles, and he's become like the apostle commissioned to go to the Gentiles. So Samaritans were called semi-Jews and were on the periphery of Judaism, as we had discussed. So that was like, okay, still like in the Jewish purview. But now the Ethiopian treasurer was a Gentile, was probably a Gentile God-fearer or a proselyte who was on the way home from a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. And this is actually, it's saying the eunuch's homeland, which is Ethiopia, is situated literally at the ends of the earth. So, and it's like, see how many uh, cultural and regional boundaries or ethnic boundaries the gospel has jumped now, because he's a black African, he is a Jewish sympathizing Gentile, he's a queen's treasurer, so it's like a political elite, and also he's a castrated male. So according to Judaism, it was like somebody who's impure and disgraceful and forever cut off from the covenant community. So this is what like in today's time, people talk about equal opportunities and rights and recognition of everybody. So like all those people, they could like say that this is totally on the point, and these marginalized people and somebody who would be looked down upon or not even considered worth it, now the gospel has been preached to such a person. And then next to Jerusalem, it's saying Caesarea was also an important city in Palestine. And like I said, this is not to be confused with Caesarea Philippi, which was the third largest city in the Greco-Roman world. This is very much a part of an important city in Palestine. And then Caesarea eventually becomes the permanent residence of Philip and his four prophesying daughters. And the references Acts 21:8. And now he's giving a historical reference here. In addition to Peter's experience in Caesarea, the church history identifies continuity of the Christian community in Caesarea. And then other historians, it's saying Origen, circa 185 to 254. So it's saying that a famous school and library was there, and it like compiled some edition of the Old Testament. And then the Vulgate also was based on that, when somebody Jerome, he worked on a revision of the Latin Bible. So basically it became a major region in the first century, and there was a vigorous Christian community here in Caesarea. Moving on now, 3:2 of this article, it starts explaining the ministry of Peter. So maybe I think that's the next thing in the map. Oh no. Okay, so no, not this map right now. I think I'll have to stop sharing. Escape and stop sharing. And so it's saying so Peter, it's calling it Peter's tour of inspection among the coastal Christian centers, because he's going there, and like we read earlier, he's gone from Jerusalem to those people, and they receive the Holy Spirit. And then so who are the Christians there? So some of them could have been the disciples of, in these coastal regions, disciples of Jesus, and probably they had fled from the persecution of the church in Jerusalem, while others may have been a result of Philip's evangelism in the area. And then yeah, so then wait, yeah, then he goes to the disciples, and then in Joppa, and then he raises from the dead this woman who's called Tabitha or Dorcas. So that is the outline of what Peter is doing here. And then it explains Jerusalem is 25 miles from Jerusalem. Lydda is 25 miles. Then Joppa is 10 miles from Lydda. And then again, it's 25 miles to Caesarea. So those sort of things. And Peter, it's also saying Peter stayed in Joppa with Simon the tanner. So again, it's somebody who's considered unclean and unpleasant. But then it's like maybe it's like sort of a prelude to Peter's next episode with Cornelius, who's a Roman centurion. So again, it's like the gospel is still going, and then there's this issue of clean and unclean foods. So Lydda in the Old Testament and Joppa were approximately 10 miles apart. And these coastal cities had a mixed population of Greek and Jewish citizens. So, so Luke is probably trying to tell us deliberately that the gospel is going beyond Judaism here. And then yeah, and then it's saying that Jews and Gentiles now can fellowship together because no persons are profane or unclean. And this is a radical reversal of what Peter and all the apostles had been like taught and believed and practiced in the Orthodox Palestine Jew scenario. And now it says the Gentiles, it's shown that the Gentiles can also become members of the church through faith and baptism. And this is a significant development in Christianity. And according to God's plan, even the Gentiles are in. So yeah, and now it just explains that, then there is silence. Or the last time Peter's missionary activities are mentioned in Acts 11, and then he's seen participating in the Jerusalem Council. But then it says that all this time he was also like he continued to preach the gospel, and probably he was located in Antioch, and he served as a missionary to the circumcised there, accompanied by his wife. And traditions also claim that he died as a martyr in Rome around AD 64 during the reign of Nero. So that, and then now it says the description that Luke is giving is moving on to the next phase in the emergence of church, which is involving Paul. So yeah, I think that's the last section, and I'm not sure how much detail I should go into, but it says the early activity of Paul. Paul. So he is introduced to the believers in Damascus by Ananias, and then briefly he preaches, and then he escapes from Jewish opponents to Damascus.
1 minute. Yeah. So let's just summarize kind of whatever you have spoken to us till now.
Yeah.
Any queries, questions? How many of you were actually able to read this part? At least till the early activity. How many of you have been reading?
I could read up to Peter's, just where Sister Shubha stopped just now.
Okay.
To that part, I have.
Yes. Anybody else who are reading?
Yes, Pastor, here also.
Okay. Good. Printo, Donna.
Pastor, I actually read till Pastor Victor, what he taught. Then my topic from Jerusalem to Rome. I didn't started what Shubha just given.
Okay. Anybody else read?
Yes, Pastor, till Philip's ministry I have read.
Alrina?
Pastor, I didn't read, honestly. I'm sorry. It's very busy.
Angel?
Skimmed over.
Come again, sister, I didn't hear you.
Just skimmed over.
Okay.
Saying.
So let me give a small little lecture for all of us here. So again, I want to remind us that we are in a course. It is important that you set aside 5 hours a week. Otherwise, you won't be able to complete the course. So, but 5 hours of reading is enough. I mean, with that 5 hours, you won't finish it initially. It won't happen. But still, the fact that you read or you come prepared reading. Now, when I divided this whole Patzia to every one of you, the idea is not to read only your part. It is to read through the whole the chapter or the article through and through, word to word, paragraph to paragraph, page to page, going through with it along with the reading of the book of Acts. Now, I really like the way Shubha sister did. She not only read the Bible, she not only read the other Patzia, she also went and tried to understand the culture at that time. And so probably in your location, where in your part of your presentation, where whichever part in the journey of Acts, you can go a little more deeper and share with your fellow colleagues that what you learned in terms of um, additional learning. But it is important that all of us work through the book of Acts with Patzia. And also, I have also let you all know that as you are doing this, you need to have a Word document that is constantly having points put in, so that tomorrow when you are going to write the competency paper, you should be able to fill in it easily, and that they may be able to. So the trend that I'm seeing right now, the trend that I'm experiencing now itself, this we could have a completely crashed batch who will not complete the program, who will eventually get backlogged. So I need all of us to get to the point of reading the articles, reading the. I know that there is challenges. If you are busy a week, then you need to compensate the next week. Take off maybe. I've done many times. I've just taken off, sat 2 days and completed my work. Or I put in additional 1 hour in the night. Everybody goes to sleep. I'll sit additional and work and finish it. So it is important that we finish our work. It's important that we read. Now I'm going slow right now, okay, because I know that you're all trying to figure out the course. So I'm going very slow at this point. I'm also very at this point very lenient in terms of the speed and. But after some time, we start to pick up speed, and you will start to see that we are finishing unit after unit very fast. Here we are still in unit 1. We are still trying to, so that every one of you will be able to get a grip of the course. But that's not the speed we are intending to. And of course, Patzia is a foundational article, so really want you to go through the article. So we are all admitted to a course. You all got your admission. We are committed to the course as we are committed to Christ. There's an equivalent into that. We are committed to the people who are sponsoring our course. And we are committed to each other. That's the most important. We are committed to each other to see that we together can finish this course. Now, I had in the earlier batches many who fell off. They never made it. And they had to be moved out of this batch, out of the batch, and then put back to actually many more were supposed to join here, who are still not joined, who are from the senior batches, but they have already attended many of the classes. But I put them in this batch because if they attend along with this batch, they are able to review and finish their articles, which they are not doing instead. So it's unfortunate that we are not able to remain committed to the course. It's like, you get married and then you have to remain committed to your wife. You can't go after every other girl that is along the way or every other man along the way. So in the same way, we are committed to this course. That means till the end of this course, you have a commitment to see you put in an amount of time. Now, I'm not saying I give an idea of 1 hour a day to see that you are doing this. And I also gave the idea that you don't need to put an extra time. Use your quiet time and things like that to engage the text and the scriptures. And so your study becomes part of your quiet time thing, and your reading of the scriptures becomes part of that, so that you don't have to additionally pull out time. Remaining committed, giving that type of time to the course is very, very essential. Otherwise, I can assure you, after 6 months, instead of going to Pauline, you will be going back to doing the book of Acts again. So it's just not going to make sense for you, because the idea is to finish the course at least to certificate of ministry by at least in 2.5 years. Don't prolong the course. Don't and the whole idea of learning, the whole idea of understanding, and the whole idea of developing a framework within you that you start to understand the scriptures completely different from the way is the way you had understood it earlier, not from a devotional angle, but you're able to see it from a very constitutional and missional angle, which will enrich you as far as most of you are involved in ministry here. And so if I look at the picture, all of you are involved in ministry here. So it will suddenly push you up one notch or several notches with your understanding of ministry itself. So you need to make the course an integral part of your life. That's the most important thing. It has to be a significant priority in your journey. Uh, for that, maybe you will have to make compromises on other things. You may have to compromise on other things. Hey, I've taken this commitment to this course. I need to put in this time. I may have to stop something else. Okay, not much lesser priority, so that you can finish the course in 2.5 years. That's the most important thing. Please don't prolong the course. You can lose 6 months off. We are doing a course every 6 months. So we have 4 courses to finish. So you are looking at 24 months you're supposed to finish off. At least 2 years you're supposed to finish, but I'm giving another, putting it 2.5 years. You should finish at least the season. So I like everyone to share your difficulties. If a week was very difficult for you, no problem. You just need to compensate that. Suppose you missed the 5 hours in a week. You need to capture that lost 5 hours in the next week, so that you need to put probably a 10-hour thing inside. Now, the best way to do is for all of us who are working is put in a leave, sit from morning till evening and cover it off, so that you are completing your course. Yes, brothers and sisters, let us hear thoughts.
Pastor, I was actually on leave yesterday, so I read all this and completed.
Yes, I did the same thing. I had to sometimes take off and sit and finish the course.
Pastor, mine is like I missed the train. I'm catching up, running behind the train.
No problem, Pastor. It's all about reading Acts and reading Patzia.
I'll try to get it soon, Pastor.
Yes. If you create the discipline now, all through the course, you will keep it going and you'll have this excitement. Now in the senior batch, you have Daisy, Suma, Robin, at Joshua, all of it at going at a neck to neck. It's like F1 racing there, Grand Prix racing. It's like they're racing through. They're all investing time, learning. They're all, writing the competencies at a very significant pace. And fantastic material is coming out of it. So you've not yet started writing your first competency. You're supposed to start preparing it, but it's a very early stage in the course. If you don't build the discipline right now, the rest of the course is a crash. Building discipline into the patterns of life that you have, the rhythms of life that you have right now, it is important to slowly incorporate the course time into it. Yes, let's listen to some difficulties. How many are finding it difficult to keep 1 hour a day?
Pastor, I actually find it difficult. You gave us a solution, like whenever you are having a quiet time, you can invest your time. But what's happening is like maybe we pray more and we read less. This is what is happening. So I'm not able to compensate like per 1 hour per day in that manner. So the only motivation I'm getting is, okay, I need to present, so I need to prepare. So that's why I was reading my portion.
I understand, but that's a dangerous trait. Praying is good. Please don't stop praying. But you need, at least you and your wife are there together. So that's a kind of close level motivation that you have. At least sitting together and reading the book of Acts and sharing your thoughts and reading out the Patzia together. It's a nice, not only it becomes an exciting journey, probably even a romantic journey for you both. But you need to, Pinto, get to the point of giving 1 hour of reading. I'm not talking about reading the article alone. That could include the important aspect of reading the scriptures. If you read the book of Acts itself and go take Patzia along with that Acts, I think that will establish you. You don't have to even go to the level of what Shubha has done of going beyond the Patzia and reading other thing material, which is good. I mean, many of the people, I have myself done a lot of these extra work that just to have understanding, geographical basis, cultural basis, and all those things are good. I mean, if you can really, because this is a course that you're doing, isn't it? If you're studying a course, you would go to the library and explore as much as possible. Now, Jeff doesn't ask you to do that also. Jeff has given you what you need to read. Jeff has not said, okay, like in a classical Bible college, okay, you need to finish the book, Emergence of the Church, and write your summary on that. No, Jeff is not doing that. Jeff is giving you one page in one article, one chapter in that book and saying, hey, read this. Okay, so we have to get to the point of reading. There is no other way out of this.
Yeah.
So how will you do this, Pinto? Now, how will you work this time into your life? It's a good thing. I'm just using you, Pinto, at this point as a scapegoat, but let's.
So what we are doing is morning we will pray, and evening time like we have our own Bible study. So with Elijah and Stuti, we are actually having a combined Bible study. So that's with Colossians chapter. So before that, actually, I'm planning like already when this course started, like me and Donna were discussing very vigorously regarding Acts and everything. Then in the long run, like that, I mean, that motivation got deviated to different things. So the main thing is like discipline. So that's one major thing actually we need to taken care of or start doing.
Okay.
At least half an hour from my side minimum, or from half an hour side from her side, we both can actually do a discussion. This is what I'm planning.
Okay, good. Now you have a study every day with Colossians study with.
Yeah, actually Colossians we started very recently, but before that we were starting from Genesis and we were continuing that. So Colossians, since we our church is actually having a combined like a discussion on 27th of this month, so that's why like we thought of doing that in focus of for the coming meeting.
Okay, that's good. I mean, your church plans don't upset that, but you don't put aside that to do this. You need to find extra time to do. For example, it's very simple. You need to probably one day take a leave and sit back and don't do anything else. Don't even eat on that day. Just from morning till evening, read off, and it's good to read in that one short setting, because it helps you to grasp much better if you were to do it in one shot and finish it up. For example, reading the Patzia article in one shot, or reading the book of Acts in one shot really helps you. So it may require you to take a half a day leave or a full day leave to sit and finish off, if you are not able to find time on a daily basis. It is important. There is no other way, because otherwise you will end up backlogged and you will not be able to finish the course. Let me explain this to you again. Now imagine you are still grappling with unit 1 and the course has reached unit 5, and you all have now upgrading to Pauline. Okay, you're going to the next course 6 months from now. And if you are still grappling with the unit 1, we don't believe in promotions and all, but if you have not submitted competencies, then I will ask you to continue with the Acts again.
Okay.
And I cannot put you to Pauline, because what happens is you are just piling backlog over the whole thing, which is crazy because it's like a mountain you will never cross. It's like a mountain you will never cross because it's not possible. So don't allow the pileup to happen.
Yeah.
I'm just going very slow at this point because I know the challenge you're going through of getting the discipline of the course into the situation. You may need to talk to your pastors and say, see, I'm doing this course. I need time to do this course. And it requires, because all of them are on the course, by the way. So they also know the kind of commitment that is required to finish the course. So you need to probably tell your pastors or your mentors to see that, hey, I'm doing this course. I want to see that I finish this course. I need to keep the time aside. So, of course, the pastors cannot compromise on what they have planned out. So it is important for you to balance these things such that I know that most of the church network and what is not, all of you are working with the network here in Bangalore. I know that there is a lot of reading, studying material, and there is a lot of activities going on. Very good. But you also need to see that you put aside a time to finish this course. And this is also part of the grander discipleship process that we have put in place for all of our networks together. And with all of you being leaders, we want you to go through this course so that you are all brought into the way of Christ and the apostles, and we have all of the churches and networks will move into a particular way of ministry that we see in the early church. That's the idea that we are going through. So it's not just, for example, I'm taking Printo's example. It's not like Printo studying to get a degree. That's not what we're looking at. It is Printo who is now will eventually become an apostolic leader who will lead the church or the church networks or assist in the whole leading of the network or the leading of church in the way of Christ and the apostles. Can you see the paradigm that we're looking at? Unfortunately, in Indian context, we join for a course, then it is about me and I passing that course, right? So that I'll get a better job or I'll do a certification to get a better job. The idea is similar, except the fact that it is not about me. It is about how God wants to use me in developing people and communities in the way of Christ and the apostles. That's the most important thing. So in you doing the course, there is a responsibility also to the community that you will be serving in seeing that you are established in a particular way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, because I can sense the challenge in the group even now at this point, at the early stage. And I know that all of you need to break through this, difficulty challenge, time challenge that is there to see that you're able to do this. For example, I have done, for me, Saturdays and Sundays are the busiest, but I've taken off some Saturday. I'll just finish my morning first principles class, and then I'll just sit till the evening and don't do anything else but sit and finish my competencies. So unless you create that discipline right now, that means to say, I used to keep it like this, when at one point I wanted to see I submit a competency every week. So I started to read at that pace to submit a competency. That means doing a full unit in a week, reading articles and sitting through the scriptures and doing the biblical theology and submitting. You don't need to do it at that pace. You need to do it at least at a speed of one submission a month. If you do one submission a month, there are 5 units for you, 5 submissions. In 5 months, you will finish your Acts course. Okay. But initially that you have a little difficulty, little challenge to start off and things like that. It's about, before marriage, now Printo had only one thing. Printo had to take care of himself, only Printo. So Printo, I'm using you, please forgive me. Okay. But then now Printo got married to this wonderful woman, Donna. Then Printo has to make time for Donna also. Printo cannot live his life the way he lived earlier. He has to make time for Donna. In the same way, when you got admitted to this course, it was just Printo and Donna and the ministry. And now Printo has to now make time for the course. And that's where the challenge is coming. Am I right, Printo?
Yeah.
Okay, now we have just started acts, right? Today I'm taking second half, the idea of map, motivated abilities pattern, the first assessments that you're supposed to do. And that's going to bring the weight again up. So I need you all to time it out very well. It's very, very important. If you need to, please sit with your pastors and work through it, because all of them are on that course, so they know what the situation is. Not that all of them are successfully doing the course. Some of them have fallen off the grid, but they understand. They're also excited that you're doing the course. Some of them only motivated you to join the course. So they need to also work with you to see that you are able to finish the course. Yes, anybody else? Thank you, Pronto. I'm sorry, I had to use you as an example.
No, no.
But yours is an ideal example, actually. Okay, others, tell me the challenge. Share the challenge with the community. Aldrina, let's start with you. No, you're not yet married, so right now you need to make space only for the course.
Nothing first. I'm usually okay. This is last 2 weeks have been bad, so I didn't get some time to read, and I wasn't really able to concentrate. It's not like I didn't try, but I didn't concentrate. But I'll finish it. Don't worry.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So you can make time, right?
Yeah, I will try to make time.
Just give me 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Shubha sister, can you please repeat the name of the book you were referring?
Uh, sure, Angel. Let me just go to, and in fact, I'll send you all screenshot also. But let me open Scribe and actually, I don't know how to pronounce the name of that guy. Wait.
Maybe you can.
Yeah, I'll send you the main thing. The Angel, I sent it in the group.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Shubha, you can continue.
Pastor, I think, yeah, except for the ministry of Paul, everything was over. But yeah, if you want, I'll read out whatever I've highlighted like here.
So you have to Ministry of Paul. You're stopping with 3.3, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I can continue. I can go on. Like, I thought it was getting too long. So I'll continue.
No. It's not. That's part of our course.
Okay.
So I just
So-
stopped to kind of get everyone started up again to think seriously about the course. That is part of the early process of the course. So
yeah.
by the way,
So now he's
I want to give you an example of a person by name, a pastor by name Arun, who studies with me in my cohort where I study. My cohort started in 2017. Okay, where I study. It is in only 2021 I got admission. I'm sorry, 2020 we got admission. Okay, almost 3 to 4 years I did not have admission when I was studying. So we could not submit the articles and things. 2022, he is still doing Acts Competency 1. And if you were to interview him, he would just tell you that now we have all finished. I finished my season. I finished Acts. I finished Pauline. I finished Essentials. I finished Leaders. I submitted the articles. I submitted this thing. I got my degree also. He's still doing Competency 1. And he's not able to go forward because he is going through a paralysis of his psychology, his psyche, because he's not able to look at this mountain and ever finish it, especially now others are finishing it. So don't get into that place. Don't get to a place that you will not be able to, the river is too deep to cross. I'm not able to, I'm struggling, I'm not be able to make it, because once it starts to pile up, then you will not be able to move forward unless you make decisions, clear decisive steps to see that you finish your competencies. Okay, please continue, Shubha.
Yeah, one more thing, Pastor. Thanks for sharing all those links. Like, I was able to watch Peter and Paul movie first part, and that also like was so nice. Like how they are suddenly getting scandalized when Peter visits Paul in those like one of the churches, and then everybody is sitting at a banquet, and they've laid a huge feast, and then and so like to watch everything like that, and how Paul is coming and he wants to know from Peter about Jesus, his visit to Jerusalem. So a lot of things are very clear. I only watched the first part, but I think it would be good, it will help us because they're showing all the dates and everything. And
any of you saw any of the movies? Did you have access to Paul? Yeah, Pastor.
I saw Paul the Emissary, only that part, and I think something else little bit, and I couldn't. I was very busy this week actually.
Yeah, no problem. Anybody else saw Peter and Paul? Did you have access to the video? Peter and Paul, I think there was a difficulty in accessing the video. But,
initially, it was showing an error.
Okay, but then eventually you got it.
Again. Yeah.
Can you download the video, and did you get an access to download it?
That I did not check, Pastor.
Okay, yeah. How do I, if I have to download it and keep it? If anybody has an access to download it? Somebody shared the link. I think Jason shared the link, right?
Yeah.
Jason?
Yes, Pastor.
Is that possible to download from where you are?
I'll have to check, Pastor. I'll check and I'll let you know.
Yeah, because I want to download that movie and keep it.
Okay.
Anybody else were able to watch any of the movies? It's a wonderful thing. If you can, why I'm giving you all these things is if you watch the movie, watch the Bible Project summary videos, read Acts, do Patzia. It's like, why is that important? Because everything, kind of builds the foundation on which you're going to do this course. If you do Acts really well, the rest of your course is easy. It is, the Pauline and everything becomes very easy for you to grasp because you know the timelines, you know the journey, you know what happened in each location. If Acts becomes like the back of your thing, Acts is like an index to all that happened in Paul's ministry. All the letters all fit into Acts actually. So if you're able to get the timeline of Acts, if you're able to get the whole journey of Paul, if you're able to figure out what the Spirit of God was doing in the early church, it forms an excellent foundation for you to build on. If you crash it here and you study it only to present or study it only to write the competency, the rest of the course can be very difficult. So please put in effort. Whatever I'm recommending, please try and stick to that. Watch the movie. If not all the movies, at least Peter and Paul, because Peter and Paul would give us, it's like a documentary of the whole book of Acts. Or there is the extensive movie, 3-hour Acts movie. If you watch that, that also gives you almost an entire documentary feeling of the book of Acts. Okay, Shubha, take on.
So yeah, the early activities of Paul, and though I have focused only on Acts, a lot of references are given from Galatians, and the word mentioned here is Galatians 1, 17 to 21. So Paul's religious Luke is recording here Paul's religious experience and baptism. So it's in Acts chapter 9, and how he introduces the then his introduction to the believers in Damascus by Ananias. And then it's saying after briefly preaching the gospel, preaching mission, he escapes from Jewish opponents in Damascus. Later on in the article, it will explain what has happened and why and all that. And then he makes a hasty trip to Jerusalem, where he meets Barnabas and other disciples. And now these certain Hellenistics, because of the confrontation, there's danger to his life. So that is why he's sent from Jerusalem to Caesarea and then to his hometown. That's in Tarsus. And so after that, like all this has happened, Paul is being used actually and groomed or whatever, or he's acquiring knowledge and all this. And several years have passed, and then finally Barnabas knows that he is competent enough to be summoned for the mission and to accompany him to Antioch, which is Acts 11 and 25 to 26. And they serve there for an entire year. And then again, you would remember there was this famine happening in Jerusalem, and which again the movie captures a little bit in detail, how people are calling out, and then there's like everybody's starving for food. So then they make a trip to this with the famine relief offering, and then they return to Antioch with John Mark. And then rest of the Acts is focusing on Paul's missionary journey of Paul and Barnabas to Cyprus and southern regions of Asia Minor, and then Paul's role in the Jerusalem Council, his Aegean ministry, his return to Jerusalem, and then his arrest in Jerusalem and trial in Caesarea, and his final volume to Rome, voyage to Rome for imprisonment and trial. So, but that's not what we're dealing with. He's just mentioned the different stages in his missionary journey. And it's saying that some years of his life, Luke is silent about. So what is happening during all these years? And then it's saying that we should note that Paul was moving about the regions of Syria and Cilicia, proclaiming the gospel and connecting with existing congregations. So a lot of people have tried to put that in a chronology, but here there's a table given by Hengel and Schwimmers of Paul's unknown years. So you could refer it to, I didn't present it or put it in my presentation, but there's figure 4 and it's a table. So it's saying AD 33 to 36, that's 3 years time, Paul is converted. So it's mentioned in Acts 9 and Galatians 1, because of course he's using his testimony in places where he mentions how he, like last time Pastor said, he gives a full recounting of his testimony and how he met Jesus and stuff. So there, and then Paul in Damascus and Nabatean kingdom. I don't know. That's again mentioned in Galatians 1:17. And then Paul's brief 15-day visit to Peter and James in Jerusalem. That's mentioned in Acts 9. So this is...
Shubha, in your map, the Nabatean region was shown.
Oh, okay.
Put up your maps. Okay. It is there.
Okay,
one of
sure.
your maps.
Yeah.
You need to understand. You need to understand where it is, the Nabatean region, so you will kind of figure out.
Okay. It's so small. Wait, in the ones which I showed outside the presentation, then I searched from them.
Yeah, it's right outside the presentation.
Phoenicia.
It is down, let's say at 4 o'clock.
Oh yeah, I got it. I'll share it again. I got it this morning, so I didn't read the entire map.
So it is predominantly, can you see Nabatea below? It's Arabian region.
This region, Arabia. Below
So,
the Dead Sea, right? Below the Dead Sea.
yes, the Nabatean region. So where did Paul actually meet Jesus?
Paul met Jesus in Damascus.
Where is Damascus?
Damascus is Syria, top up there, no?
Can
Like,
you
it's not
see
shown in this map.
Damascus is there? Is there in that map? Is that Damascus on top there?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, and there's one road also which is leading there.
Uh-huh.
Straight. That road goes down Arabia and then Nabatea. Okay.
So you know what he's talking about.
Okay,
He meets Jesus in Damascus. He is discipled there by Ananias and the church there. And then because of danger, he moves out. He travels around this Arabian region and he engages with the communities that know. For example, as he is traveling, probably Decapolis. Why is Decapolis important? Because there was this man who was healed by Jesus, or I think delivered by Jesus, who goes and preaches in the 10 cities. Decapolis, you know that verse, that particular incident, right?
Yeah.
So there were communities already that were there that had an experience of Jesus. He was engaging with those communities, scholars say, and then he went eventually to Tarsus, isn't it? From there, he went to Judea and sat with the apostles because he was having revelations now. Because he was a scholar himself, you need to understand the background of Paul. He was a scholar, he was a Jewish scholar, he was a Pharisee. He knew the text very well. So with his salvation experience, everything fell into place for him. You understand? Suddenly, all of it made sense to him. The Spirit of God started to dwell in him. So revelation started to come to him. He started to see the gospel. And then he goes to the apostles to figure this out because they were eyewitnesses to Christ. He went, he kind of 15 days, they say he was spent time with them. And he kind of discussed and got, and that's where Barnabas helps him in connecting, okay? Which probably, if it was me, I would have never connected it, knowing that he will be popular than me, actually. But anyway, the Barnabas spirit is amazing. So Barnabas connects Paul there to the apostles. The apostles spend time with Paul, and probably Paul confirmed many of his understandings on the theology or the Christology, and with that he was established and then went back to Tarsus. So it was basically Barnabas telling Paul, go and wait there, I'll call you. But actually he had to wait several, I think almost 14 years or something, Paul waited. Now, Paul's life in Tarsus itself, nobody knows exactly what happened. But knowing the way Paul was wired, he wouldn't have kept silent. And there's a nice in that video, in that movie. It's so beautiful when actually Barnabas comes to take Paul back. Paul is very upset. Fellow, you told me to wait. You didn't tell me to wait for 14 years or something like that. Very nice. It's that part, So we need to know that Paul was a Pharisee. Paul understood the scriptures. Paul knew. Paul was a Jew who was waiting for the Messiah, and for having met Jesus, actually opened his mind, and he had revelations which he verified with the eyewitnesses of Christ, and he was clear of the gospel. So he had a more difficult task of taking the gospel to the Gentiles, being a Jew himself. And you can see the challenges all through his writings and everything in the whole process. I wish all of you watch the video because then it's so much clear, the actual incidents are so beautiful to see, how it happened. Yes. I think Nabatea, you understood where it is. That's what I wanted to show. Yes.
And in the same map, I saw Jacob's well also. I think that's where the Samaritan woman met Jesus.
Yes. Okay, so you can see the timeline, AD 33 to 36. It was Paul's conversion, his life in Damascus. He went to the Nabatean regions, 15 days to be with Peter and James in that. Then 36 to 39 or 40, Paul's missionary activity in Tarsus and Cilicia. So he has put it as missionary activity. Now, if you go to those parts, if you see Acts 9:30, it says that And when the brothers learned this, they brought him down to Caesarea and sent him off to Tarsus. That is the issue at Jerusalem. When he had come to Jerusalem, he attempted to join the disciples, and they were all afraid of him, for they did not believe that he was a disciple. But Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles and declared to them how on the road he had seen the Lord and who spoke to him, and how at Damascus he had preached boldly in the name of Jesus. So that's an evidence that Paul was doing ministry in Damascus. Okay, we don't have timelines, but there were about 3 years he spent in Damascus, Nabatea, and his 15 days journey, probably at the end of those 3 years to Jerusalem. Okay, and so he went in and out among them at Jerusalem, preaching boldly in the name of Jesus. Can you see that while he was in Jerusalem, also he preached the gospel. So if you see the trend that when he was in Damascus, he was preaching the gospel. When he was in Jerusalem, he was preaching the gospel. The time in between in Nabatea would also have been preaching the gospel. So he was involved. That's it. It's an assumption or a speculation, but it's pretty good speculation because you see this man constantly preaching the gospel in Acts chapter 9 verses 26 to 30. And then they to take him to Caesarea and take him off to because he had problems. So he went in and out among Jerusalem preaching boldly in the name of the Lord. Who was this guy? Just 3 years back, he was putting people in prison, right? So now it's like the head of RSS, Mr. Mutalik, or Ramsena Mutalik, suddenly coming to Christ and going and preaching among these guys the gospel. It's the same effect. In fact, you better to use Mutalik than even RSS head, because Mutalik is more identifiable with the way Paul was performing. So he had created enemies there, and he spoke and disputed against the Hellenists, but they were seeking to kill him. You notice that the way the gospel creates reactions, it is the same thing. If you read in the Gospels, when Jesus was preaching to the Jewish nation, they all wanted to kill him. I'm slowly figuring out, if you're preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ, the tendency and the reaction of people should be to kill you. That reaction is pretty common. I mean, if you see it, all of this. And when the brothers learned this, they brought him down to Caesarea and sent him off to Tarsus. Can you see? That's the end of the record of Paul there. Until then, Paul is brought back in. Luke drops him there, and then only in 11.
26.
11:26 we'll see again. You need to understand why Luke is doing that. See, Luke is recording many issues, okay, parallel issues that are going on. So he drops one, picks up another line, and starts to give you that parallel that is going on. So it's important to put it on a time frame. So we know that AD 36 to 40, Paul's missionary activity in Tarsus and Cilicia. That means to say, I mean, not that it is recorded. Acts 9:30, you don't see anything there that is there. And if you see Galatians 1:21, let's look at Galatians 1:21. And you need to keep this scripture always there because it's one of the records of the silent years of Paul. Galatians 1:21. Then after 3 years, I went up to Jerusalem to visit Cephas and remained with him for 15 days. Can you see that? Galatians 1:18 I'm reading. You need to connect it to the timeline, the Acts timeline. Okay? But I saw none of the other apostles except James, the Lord's brother. In what I am writing to you before God, I do not lie. Then I went into the regions of Syria and Cilicia. That is where is Tarsus and things like that. And I was still unknown in person to the churches of Judea that are in Christ. They only were hearing it said, he who used to persecute us now is preaching the faith he once tried to destroy, and they glorified God because of it. Then after 14 years, I went up again to Jerusalem with Barnabas. Can you now see that timeline? Now, which is that going to Jerusalem? You can see that here. Once he in Acts, after his salvation, you can come to 27, Acts 11 and verse 27 to the end of the thing. Let me read for you. Acts 27. Then after 14, I'm trying to connect Acts, the Galatians mention of 14 years of Paul. Now in these days, prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch, and one of them named Agabus stood up and foretold by the Spirit that there would be a great famine all over the world. This took place in the days of Claudius. So the disciples determined everyone according to their ability to send relief to the brothers living in Judea, and they did so, sending it to the elders by the hand of Barnabas and Saul. Now, can you connect that with the Galatians record of where he says, then after 14 years, I went up to Jerusalem with Barnabas, taking Titus along with me, and I went up because our revelation said before them through privately before the those who seemed influential, the gospel that I proclaim. Is that the one, or it could be the Jerusalem Council also? Okay, so it could also be Jerusalem Council in Acts 15, because if you read the Galatians record, it looks like it was probably for the defense of the gospel he was preaching to the Gentiles. So can you see that if it is Acts 15 that we are talking about in Galatians chapter 1, chapter 2 verse 1, then you are looking at 14 years from which date? 14 years from
AD 33 when he converted.
Is it from that time or probably the end of that?
Yes, Pastor, because see, according to this table, there is 3 years his conversion, and then visit to Peter and James, then again 3 years, and then these 8-9 years. And because at the end of the table, it says journey to Jerusalem for the Apostolic Council. So that sums up to 14 years approximately
Possible,
with this
yeah.
table.
Yeah. So we have a timeline there. So we have a timeline that we can capture so that you are able to put the book of Acts and the events of Acts on a timeline. And then you need to understand that when Paul, when Luke is writing events, he is stopping Saul and starting with Peter. That doesn't mean that it is after Paul that Peter happened. Peter could also be a parallel timeline, you know. He's just recording one the other. Does that make sense to all of you? I mean, does it? So in figure 4, you are getting an idea of timeline. In figure 3, you are getting a geographic picture. Figure 3, where he talks Peter's itinerary. So Caesarea, he's trying to give you an idea of how much distance was there in this whole, space that we are working with. And of course, he goes on to show you space and time constantly, so that you will understand it in the framework of when you're reading the. Does that make everyone make so AD 33 to you're looking at around 49, you're looking at about 14 years. Probably, I would say it was probably from 36 to 50 that we are talking about. So when Paul mentions in Galatians chapter 1 and 14 years later, it would be after, he went to, let's say, from 36 approximately. So you were looking at around from that point onwards, 14 years. But anyway, it doesn't matter, but you have an approximate idea of the space, the time frame. So you are looking at from Acts chapter 1 to Acts chapter 15, what would be the time zone that you're looking at? You're looking at around 14-15 years have transpired. But when we are reading Acts chapter 1 to Acts chapter 15, we're almost reading it like it happened next day. So you would have a feeling that it is about 3 weeks. Am I correct? When we read the Acts before, maybe 3 weeks to 3 months, maybe is all the timeline that we were, because Luke is recording it as one after the other event. And when we are reading the book of Acts, imagine up to the book of chapter of 15, which is almost at the midway of Acts, we would have only looked at it as a matter of about 3 months, 3 weeks to 3 months. But now we are seeing that there is a span of 15 years. 15 years that have transpired from Acts chapter 1 to Acts chapter 15. From Pentecost to the Jerusalem Council is 15 years that has transpired. Does that change the way we think about the text? Yes, brothers and sisters. Can you see what Patzia is doing? Don't you think it is important that we understand the scriptures in the time frame of distance, geography, and time, especially time, because geography was messed up. Because as we read earlier, there was not enough maps and there was a vague understanding, so they constantly wrote it in the geographical frame. But still, it makes sense. Still, it makes sense in terms of understanding distances and things like that. Yes. Are we all okay with the time frames? So the last one, 8 to 9 years, Paul joins Barnabas in Antioch 1 year, Acts 11:20, but with additional activity in the city and the regions of Syria and Phoenicia. First missionary journey to Cyprus, Cilicia, southern Galatia, Acts 13 to 14:28. Journey to Jerusalem for the Jerusalem Council. So it's very interesting. I mean, if he didn't put this chart, we would never kind of figure it the time frame, isn't it? So with that, it also gives us the time frame of the entire book of Acts up till 50. So is it 14 years or is it more than that? Because from Paul's conversion to this thing, it is saying. So the Paul's conversion probably happened somewhere AD 33, 36, because Jesus would have been crucified and Pentecost would have been at somewhere AD 28. Okay. So you are actually from Acts chapter 1 to Acts chapter 16 is more than that time. So you should be about looking at about 18 to 20 years actually. Are you able to get that time frame? See, we are recording Paul's conversion in AD 33, right? But Paul's conversion was significantly after, much later than the Pentecost. And we looked at the birth of Jesus at somewhere at AD 4, I mean BC 4. And if you look at Jesus at 30 at baptism, would have at the age of 30, he received the baptism. We're looking at, if you take it from 4 to 30 years, if you add 30 years, we could come to approximately around 28. So from 28 to 33 is about 5 years. So 14 plus 5 is about 19. 20 years is the time frame from Acts chapter 1 to Acts chapter 15. And Jerusalem Council is a landmark event. Why is it a landmark event, Jerusalem? Yes, everybody needs to unmute and discuss. I know that some of you may be getting ready to go for work and if you're changing dress and all, don't bother at this point. If you're cooking, you can still discuss. There's no problem. We don't mind sound. Yes, we need to engage. Otherwise, we'll change the time where we can all engage. I need all of you to engage. Otherwise, it doesn't work. We have to discuss. How do I know that you're all understood?
Pastor, you asked why was the Jerusalem Council a landmark event?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I think that was in many ways the acknowledgement that God indeed includes the Gentiles as well.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, it is the landmark event, because that was the official endorsement of the gospel to the Gentiles. It was the official endorsement of how the Gentiles would practice the gospel. But The defense was based on all that happened before that. And it's like the testimony of Peter saying that the way the Spirit fell upon us on the day of Pentecost is the same way it fell upon the Samaritans, same way it fell upon the Gentiles in Cornelius' house. Therefore, if Christ has accepted them, the Spirit has for who are we to stop them? You understood the whole defense that Peter uses there in terms of is it there in that, or that is Paul's this thing defense in Peter actually defends that a little earlier, right? Is that Peter's defense is a little earlier than that, right? Or is it in the same one?
Acts 15 is about the circumcision and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Probably Peter also mentions it after
Yes,
the
it's that.
40
It
days.
is that. Yeah, Acts chapter 15. It says, the apostles and the elders gathered together in the better, and after they had much debate, Peter stood up and said to them, "Brothers, you know that in the early days God made a choice among you that by the mouth of the Gentiles should hear the word of the gospel and believe. And God, who knows the heart, bore witness to them by giving them the Spirit, just as He did to us." Yes, it is here only. It is a landmark event, but all of that testimony is based on the events that have already transpired. They have seen. I mean, what were the other very landmark events? That one is a falling of the Spirit upon the Gentiles and the Samaritans, which is evidenced by the speaking of tongues. Luke records it like that for us, that there is acceptance. Okay. Then the other thing was Stephen's message. In that there was a what we call as a umbilical cord cutting was there. What was he said? God does not dwell in temples made with hands. Can you imagine telling that a Jew? Can you see that event was very strong? So these events are very, very critical to the. Okay, let's take a short break, and I'll come back. Short break, all of you. Or if you'd like to continue to discuss, whenever nobody is discussing, only Shubha, me, and Pastor Victor seems to be talking. In between, a few of you are speaking. But this is not how our typical class should happen. There should be a significant amount of discussion and arguments, because, and it is possible that you are not able to involve in the discussion because you have not read. So you want to remain strategic silence. But the idea is all of us have read, all of us are thinking through, and all of us are contributing. And that would actually lead to the best possible learning experience that we will have. Okay, we'll take a 5 minutes to 10 minutes break and come back. Yes. So we are not able to engage with the conversation because we don't have an idea with the whole thing. So today, in today's discussion, we saw those maps. What did those maps tell us? The maps told that there is Judea and there is Samaria and there is Galilee. Can you imagine suddenly you kind of figure out the whole idea of Jesus walking through Samaria to, from Galilee to Jerusalem, and from Jerusalem to which they would take another route. That's how he meets this Samaritan woman also. And then the whole framework of the first aspect of the journey of the gospel from Acts chapter 1 to Acts chapter 15 is kind of very clear to us when we see that maps. And then when we put it on the timeline of about 15 to 20 years, the entire time journey from Acts chapter 1 to Acts chapter 15, you get the timeline as well as the geography of that region. And that helps you to put the whole narrative in a reasonably good time space framework, which gives you additional support to your biblical theology that you're developing. Does that make sense? Sorry, I'll take a break again, but I just don't want us to miss out. Because I know that without me engaging, I don't think anybody is engaging. Shubha, can you take on again a little bit more in terms of?
Pastor. What should I say about?
But I mean, if are you planning to do 3.3.1 and 3.3.2 and 3.3?
Yeah, up to 3.3.4 I have to take.
Okay, you please continue. Go ahead.
Okay. Sure. Okay, so now 331 says the Christian community in Damascus was found probably by some Jewish Christian Hellenists who had fled Jerusalem during the persecution, followed by Stephen's martyrdom. So they began their mission in synagogues and were appealing primarily to the Gentiles, God-fearers who were attracted to Judaism. So that is their audience. And
don't you think that the story of Damascus is similar to the story of Antioch?
okay.
It's interesting, right? I'll just ask you a very controversial question. The story of Antioch was very simple. Some Hellenist Jews were fleeing the persecution of Stephen, and they preached the gospel at Antioch, and then Antioch then became a church. Now, here it says the same thing. Some Hellenistic Jews preached the gospel there first, right? And they founded the church there. Of course, Luke doesn't record the journey of the Damascus church, but we know that Ananias was probably an elder there. He was a Jew, probably a very strong Jew himself. But there was a good eldership there, that God spoke to him and to see that Paul is brought into the church and he was discipled there. And we can get clear pictures of that in the record of Paul's conversion. But you know what? We need to understand that Luke is only highlighting some of it. And that the Damascus church was probably an Antioch church equivalent. In some way, Paul was sent from the Damascus church, right? In some way, Paul was sent from the Damascus church to the Nemetian region and other places, probably. We are not having records of that. So that unknown years of Paul probably was in missions, probably sent from the Damascus church. And probably that whole idea of being sent by a church and then eventually that happening when in Antioch and they're traveling from Antioch itself is also can be a parallel. I mean, I'm just speculatively thinking here, holy imagination. But if you see, the Christian community in Damascus was probably founded by the Jewish Christian Hellenists who had fled Jerusalem during the persecution following Stephen's martyrdom. Is the same story that you can see in Antioch chapter in Acts chapter 11 also. What do you think? The Hellenists began their mission in synagogues, appealing primarily to the Gentiles, God-fearers, who were attracted to Judaism. When Paul resided in Damascus, he met with a group of disciples, Acts 9:19, and personally began his own ministry of proclamation, keriso or kerygma, to Jews and Greek sympathizers, Acts chapter 9, 20 and 21. Eventually, these early Christians formed small conventicles of followers where messianic doctrines and Christianity, apart from the law, were taught. So messianic conventicles, small groups, small house churches kind of a scenario is what we are seeing there. So you can see that in Damascus, which of course is happening in Acts. Where do we see that in Acts? We see it. Paul's conversion is happening
Acts 9. Acts 9.
Acts 9. So Saul's conversion is happening in 9, and Saul, from if you read from verse 19, for some days he was with the disciples at Damascus, and immediately he proclaimed Jesus in the synagogues, saying he is the Son of God. And all who heard him were amazed and said, "Is it not the man who made havoc in Jerusalem of those who had called upon his name? And has he not come here for this purpose, to bring him bound?" But Saul increased all the more in strength and confounded the Jews who lived in Damascus, proving that Jesus was the Christ. When many days had passed, the Jews plotted to kill him. Their plot became known to Saul, and they were watching the gates at night and to kill him. But his disciples took him by night and let him down an opening in the wall in the basket. And when he had come to Jerusalem, he attempted to join us. So the ministry of Paul in Damascus, there seems to be an established church there already. So that's a very interesting picture that we are getting. So something like Antioch, which is more detailed described by Luke, the whole formation of it, seems to be something that happened. I mean, Damascus seems to have a similar experience much earlier, because the fact that Ananias was there and he brought him to a group of disciples. Okay, give me another 5-10 minutes. I'll just drop my other daughter and come back. But Shubha, please continue your discussion. Okay, I don't want to stop it because we just have another 45 minutes. Shubha, you can continue to finish that.
So, yeah, I would like to read from the book why Syria. I mean, because the Jews, or maybe like initially, before we see that Peter has this vision, or before the gospel reaches the Gentiles, I'm sure the Christians who would have fled Syria, traditionally the Jews did not regard it as, like unholy or something, because like what the book says, Syria, which seems to have been regarded in the sense intermediate between the land and outside the land. So it was sort of an intermediate. So I am sure they did not have any trouble taking the gospel there or connecting with the communities there, because traditionally before all this council happened, the discussion happened, and the openness to reaching out to the Gentiles. So the term Soria or Syria does not include the country alone, but all the lands within. According to the rabbis, David had subdued, such as Mesopotamia, Syria, Zobah, and Aklab, etc. So they're saying we can't go in too much into details about what the geographical boundaries of those are, but they are something which is distinguished from Palestine proper. And then they were saying that if somebody could have, there was so much favor for Syria that if people could have stepped in straight from the soil of Palestine, or joint fields between the two countries without the Gentile strip, the land and dust of Syria would be considered clean, like Palestine itself. There was thus around the land a sort of an inner band consisting of those countries which had been annexed by David and termed Soria or Syria, whatever they call it. But beside this, there was also what was called the outer band toward the Gentile world, consisting of Egypt, Babylon, Ammon, and Moab, the countries in which Israel had special interest and which they distinguished from the rest outside the world. So you see, like I said, in terms of holiness, first there's Jerusalem, which is considered the Holy of Holies. Then it's like Judea, and then between Samaria comes, which they totally want to overstep. And then there is Galilee, which they make fun of, but it's still part of the Holy Land. Then there is Syria, this outer band, this inner band. Then there is this outer band consisting of like Egypt, Babylon, and others, which Israel has special interest. And then there is the rest of the outside world. So that was the thing, how they distinguished in those times in terms of holiness. So Damascus being part of Syria and all those regions. So I'm sure they were not too averse to going there. And now reading from our article. Okay. So yeah, Pastor read up till that part where they said messianic doctrines in Christianity apart from the law were taught. So then Paul's message, it was successful, but also controversial. And then the Jews, as we know here, and the reference is Acts 9:23. It was found irritating to the Jews, and they started plotting his death. And then he is lowered down the wall, and his fellow believers, and then he escapes. And then he made it saying we can suspect that Paul had numerous contacts with this Damascus church, and it's giving reference between 37 and 47 to 48 AD. So like those years where we are saying that Paul has joined Barnabas and all that. So between all those years, and also in his activities in Tarsus and Sicilia, that time frame, he's having contacts with the people in Damascus church. And then it's saying Paul's ministries in Damascus. Now it's describing he stayed 3 years in Damascus and Arabia, that is the Nabatean kingdom, before he was forced to flee. And when we say he was forced to flee because of these tensions, the article says he was still an active missionary, and we should not assume that he lived in isolation, solitude, and meditation. And in fact, he was proclaiming and preaching in the synagogues, hoping to reach his own people through the gospel. But it became very evident as we keep on reading. Whenever he preached in synagogues, he was more successful with God-fearers, which is the Gentiles, in these synagogues. And then it says about this 15-day visit to Jerusalem. We've already seen the overview of all this in the table. And there he conferred with Peter and James. And he's saying now that he's a missionary loner so far. And now he's wanting to make contact with the group of apostles and the spokesman, which is like Peter, for the young Jesus community in the holy city. So even in Peter and Paul movie, if you guys will see, this is shown how he's really hungry to know, because he knows that Peter, James, and others have first-hand experience, and they've been with Christ. So he really wants to know, and they're not very open to receiving him, because they suspect and the things they've done initially, and James. But then he wants to gather valuable information about Jesus and the significance of his life, his teaching, and his death. So Jesus stood at the center of these conversations, though we do not see that many details in Acts, but that is what this article is telling us in details. And some of the traditions that Paul received and were handed down to the communities like Corinthians, Thessalonians, and others, they come from this visit. So this is very significant. The time is brief. It's 15-day visit, it says in Jerusalem, but the writer here is saying we should not, the briefness of the time should not reduce the significance of the visit, because Paul's theology, which eventually finds full expression in his letters to the different churches, it was formed here as a result of this interaction. Now we go to, I think this is the last part. Yes, Paul was in Tarsus. So Tarsus is his hometown. And then Luke is considerably silent about Paul's stay in Tarsus, and it's puzzling. But as we read in the upper thing, where he's in isolation, he's not in isolation, and we shouldn't assume that if he's fled for safety, he was still preaching and proclaiming the gospel. And again, the statement says, Paul certainly proclaimed the gospel in his hometown of Tarsus and the like nearby region of Sicilia for 3 years. That is AD 36 to AD 36 to 38 or 40, something like that. And the Christian communities were, as a result of his preaching, Christian communities were established in Tarsus and neighboring cities, like we said, Sicilia is one of them, and the surrounding areas. And most of the Christian communities here were consisting of Jews or Gentiles who began their religious quest. So they were searching already for God in the synagogues. And as a result, like Paul used to preach in these synagogues, and these Gentiles and maybe some Jews also who were already in the synagogue, they converted. And so he's saying, why is this significant? So there's twofold significance, because Paul was actively engaged in mission after his conversion. He did not merely sit around waiting for heavenly vision. So now that he has, so I think that is one nice key or some important point, that though he didn't, he after he was converted, he didn't wait for another vision. He's already had a vision. He's converted, so now he's continuing to go on preaching. And despite persecution and despite not having another direct revelation, he's still continuing on the mission. And it's making a statement here that his success in Tarsus probably was the main reason, because in the table, the third column, it says, now Barnabas has invited him to join him for the challenge in Antioch. And as you know, now they're moving farther and farther out into from the Holy Land, the inner band, outer band, and Syria and other places. Now they're moving to Antioch. And until when Antioch starts is the end of what they consider like their own land and the territory. And after that, it's actually the rest of the outer world. So that's the challenge they're facing in Antioch. And Paul's missionary activities began before, definitely we know, before his call to Antioch, and then his first visit to Asia Minor with Barnabas. And then after this, he goes to for the further expansion in the Aegean Sea. And then it is extremely significant all these years for the church, as well as Paul's theological development and maturity. So one by one, he's reaching out, and then it's leading to like what we see when we'll study Pauline and we'll see all the letters and stuff. So this is all his formative years where he's picking up theology and the traditions that he's handing down to others, and maybe developing his own character. Thank you. If anybody has any questions or something, please let me know.
Yes, sister, I have a question. How about Paul's life before Damascus? Actually, he was actually learning from Gamaliel. And
Yeah.
do you know about something, or do you have any information about that?
So, brother, give me some time. I will search for information. Right now, I don't have, because I didn't read. And in this book, they're only telling about Jewish life. But I'm sure if I find something, I will send it in the group.
Okay, okay. Sister. Victor Pastor, there is actually a question is there. You would have heard about that. That is actually Paul is not married and all. Is it right, Pastor? Or some of them are saying like that. But actually, the person who's writing First Corinthians about the marriage life and all, I don't think like that. But some arguments, some people are saying that Paul is not married and all. So I just want to know about that.
I am not, so sure because there is no clarity as to whether he was married or not. Only reference I think he makes is, as other apostles, do we, even we have the right to get married. That is the only statement he talks in support of marriage and all. But there is, I think, no proof whether he was married or not married. Nowhere. Maybe Pastor George, if you know anything on that.
Oh, we came to Paul's marital life. Huh? Very nice.
No, Pastor George, actually here in Tamil Nadu, some arguments already there. So many years. Actually, some of them saying that Paul is not married. Since actually, Sister Shubha was speaking about Paul's life, Paul's ministry. I had this question again, remembering.
Okay.
While he was reaching Damascus, he was not saved. He was learning all the scriptures from Gamaliel. Am I right, Pastor? But
yeah, he was trained under Gamaliel. It's like Harvard of our current generation. He was in Harvard, trained in Harvard. So he was in that level. Yes, Princeton, Harvard, that legacy. So if you want to know about Paul's marital life, now I'll take you to 1 Corinthians 7. Now, concerning the matters about which you wrote, it is good for a man not to have a sexual relationship with a woman. Imagine if you read that and stopped there. It would have been a very difficult proposition, right? And that's how we read the Bible always, right? Imagine I'm speaking at a marriage ceremony and my message is based on 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 1. If I only touch that.
No, that's what I also saying, Pastor. Without going to Metropolitan, I cannot give guidance to people to travel to the place. So only a person who's married can teach something like that.
Correct. But Paul also had revelation. So that the mystery was revealed to him, and the plan of the church was given to him. That is one aspect. But let's look at this. Now imagine if you read this passage at a wedding ceremony and stopped it there. The groom would actually get up from there where he's sitting and come and beat you up, right? But because of temptation to sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife and each woman her own husband. Do you think that is what Paul is trying to tell here? That marry only for sexual pleasure? Come on, marriage has a whole, its origins in the creation order. And definitely Paul is addressing, see, you can see here now, concerning the matters which you wrote. Now, we don't have that letter with us, isn't it? We don't have that letter with us. So Paul is addressing some other issue, which we'll have to speculate because it is evident from what his issue is there. So it is not that, you should marry to fulfill your sexual pleasure. That's not the idea of marriage. Okay. The idea of marriage is one flesh, which was there in the Garden of Eden. When God created mankind, he created them as a composite being in day 6. And together they reflected the image of God. Then God separates the woman from the man and brings back in the marriage. And that concept of one flesh is the idea of one flesh. One flesh is not even a sexual union. The one flesh idea is when they were created originally, they were a composite being. Okay, so the idea of marriage has much more deeper meaning than just what Paul is addressing here. The husband should give to his wife her conjugal rights, and likewise the wife to her husband. And if you go to a court or family court, that's what they would say even today, isn't it? Okay, for the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. Likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do we ever teach this in church? But don't you think that is so powerful, that teaching? Do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a limited time, that you may devote yourselves to prayer, and then come together again, so that Satan may not tempt you because of a lack of self-control. Now, as a concession, not a command, I say this: I wish that all were as myself am, but each one has his own gift from God, one of one kind and one of another. So as I am, we are speculating that Paul is talking about celibacy life, and he's considering that as a gift. Now we talk about all the Holy Spirit gifts, but we don't talk about this particular gift, right? All of us want tongue and prophecy, but not celibacy.
If we speak this, that the youth will throw the stones on us first.
Yeah, it's very interesting. But look at what Paul did. To the unmarried and the widows, I say, to the unmarried and the widows, I say that it is good for them to remain single as I am. To the unmarried and the widows. What is that? Unmarried and the widows?
But so you mean to say that actually he's speaking through the revelation given by the Spirit, Pastor, Holy Spirit?
No. I'm just taking you through a journey, just because, it's a very interesting discussion. It's one of the most controversial discussions. Paul's marital life. possible potential marital life. To the unmarried and the widows, I say that it is good for them to remain single as I am, but if they cannot exercise self-control, they should marry, or it is better to marry than to burn with passion. Now, can you tell this? Is that a teaching Paul is giving to the unmarried, as in the singles who are just before their marriage? Hey guys, all of you are meant to be celibate. Is that what he's talking about? Is that what the idea that God generally in the text talks about? It is God's plan that all should be married, right? Do we all agree with that? That is God's great plan, that people should be in families.
Not everybody, Pastor.
Why, brother?
No, some of them are called to be like.
Not just generally. Generally, the plan is not celibacy.
Yes, Pastor. Yes, Pastor. Yes.
Okay, but Paul is speaking from a specific place. So when he says to the unmarried and the widows, I say that it is good for them to remain single as I. Does that make sense? Is that unmarried people who are singles? That means pre-married. I mean, imagine there are many in this group also now. Can I tell this, preach to them and say, all of you who are unmarried here, that includes Jason, Susan, Alrina, all of you guys, even Angel is there, and Shubha is there. So I can say to them like this now. You see, this is what Paul is saying to the unmarried. Of course, unmarried are there. The widows, maybe none of us here are widows at this point. I say that it is good for them, good for you to remain single as I am, as Paul was. Is that a good teaching to give? Is that a balanced teaching? Is that what Paul is trying to tell there? Something wrong, right?
But after marriage, I think this is good teaching, Pastor.
Come again.
And after marriage and several years, now I think it is a good teaching, because whoever want to do ministry, it is not easy to balance the family and ministry.
Oh, Pastor, I will absolutely disagree with it. Paul, okay, can I argue, Sister, Pastor, just for the sake of argument, okay? Just for the sake of argument, I want to, because that's a common statement we hear. But if you read 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 1 onwards, when you look at the qualities of an overseer, can you read it and tell me what it says?
Yes, Pastor.
1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 1 onwards. All the way down up to 5. Anybody can read, no problem. All of you who are in the class.
1 Timothy 3, Pastor, it is 1. Yeah. This is a faithful saying: if a man desires the position of a bishop, he desires a good work. A bishop then must be a blameless, the husband of one wife.
Okay, can I stop it there? What do you think now?
Yes.
What's Paul's intention that we should do ministry without marriage?
It's true, Pastor, but even in a TPM church and a Roman Catholic church, people are without marriage now, Pastor.
Pastor, we cannot refer to a contemporary paradigm. We have to refer to the apostolic paradigm, the early church paradigm, which is our basis.
And also, Paul also saying that one who's married is actually pleasing his wife. One is not married is actually fully dedicated to the Lord, and he pleasing the Lord.
Pastor, you are reading all of those texts out of context. But when this is a general instruction Paul is giving to Timothy, who is an apostolic team member, who he is deputed in Ephesus, he's deputed him in different places. And when he is telling Timothy, when you are choosing a leader over the church, you need to see that he's a married guy.
Yes, Pastor, that's true.
So the idea that, if I was not married, I can do ministry. But let me tell you, if we are doing ministry that is not balancing with our marriage, then our ministry is not something that God will accept. It is outside the will of God. The marriage is one of the best checks for our ministry life. Okay, let's go a little more down. You can see The husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, and able to teach. Not a drunkard, not a violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own household well with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. That means he must be a father also. Can you see? Not just a husband, but a father too. Then he says, for if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for the house of God or the God's church? So the check for him to be an elder or a leader over a congregation is that he is able to have excellent marital life, excellent family life. Am I correct? Does that change our paradigm? Now, if you come back to chapter 7, 1 Corinthians, and he says, now to the unmarried and the widows, I say to you that is the best to remain single. Does it contradict? Now, what I'm trying to say here, the word unmarried there is not the way we understand as the singles. Theologians and scholars say that it is to the unmarried and the widows. It is actually for men who, the idea of widowers, which we have in our context, the Greco-Roman culture or the Jewish culture refer to them as unmarried. You understood the concept? Anybody? Does that make sense?
This is like a revelation, George.
Yeah, but just work with Pastor Lemo. I like the revival. I just see the video comes on and you come on. I love it.
The topic made him to come back, I think.
Pastor Lemo, I'm happy this subject about revival. But let's just work. I mean, just work with me on the text. Just look at the text. I mean, would Paul, who says that you want to be a leader of a church, you should be a good husband and a good father, would he say to singles, hey guys, I don't want you to get married like I'm and be like, I want you to be like me? Does that make sense? It doesn't make sense. So when you look at that text, to the unmarried and the widows, I say, it is basically telling, or to all the men who are widows and the women who are widows, I would suggest, okay, that it is good for them to remain single as I am. Can you see that Paul was probably a widower there? There's a huge potential there. We cannot say for arguing it as 100% short, but a lot of theologians are saying that he probably had a wife and probably she passed away and he was a widower. And therefore he had a pretty good, like Pastor Satish said, good understanding of what marriage was. And this is my conclusion after years, about close to at least 22 years of married life and ministry life. Any ministry that takes you away from your marriage and your primary role as father and husband is not a ministry that is in the plan of God. The best check of your ministry is your family life. That's what Paul uses there. You look at 1 Timothy, that is... Yes, Pastor Satish.
Pastor, sorry to, just only for argument. Actually, even the teachings of Jesus and teachings of Paul is totally different. When Jesus is speaking, actually, when he was in the world, he said, whoever leave his wife, children's, father, mother, he was speaking like that. But Paul actually, while teaching, the person who is not looking after his family is not worthy to look after the church. So it is totally contradict.
Good question. Good question. Now, when Jesus said who leaves his father, mother, and this thing, the understanding is not, if you read it in context, it is not about leaving your husband or wife, because he's very clear, divorce is against the plan of God. Okay? Divorce is against the plan of God. That is a very clear teaching that Jesus is having. So Jesus cannot contradict himself, right? So when he is talking about it, he's saying in terms of the following of him, it is important that your allegiance is primarily to me. And your every aspect of your dimension of your life comes under lordship to me. And under Jesus' lordship, you would be the best husband, actually. It is not about, leaving the father, mother, and all of those things. It's not that context that we're talking about. Because we do not have a full revelation of the gospel. We do not have a full understanding of the gospel. We get stuck in some of these. I was struggling with this particular text a lot. It is not about leaving a husband or leaving a wife and children and going for ministry that he's talking there. If you read that passage very clearly, he is talking about the primary allegiance that if you're following Jesus, should be to Jesus and to what he says in the lordship. And the lordship of Jesus is very clear, that you should take care of your wife, you should take care of your children. That's your primary commitment. And how do you get that? Because it is Jesus who revealed the teachings that has to be taught to the church, to the apostles. When you read the apostolic teachings, it's very clear what we are supposed to do with regard to marriage. And when Jesus actually addresses the issue of marriage, he says, please refer to Moses. Am I correct? When Jesus addresses marriage, he always says, please refer to Moses. Have you seen that?
Yes, Pastor.
Why does he refer to Moses? What is he meaning by refer to Moses? Does Jesus quote the verse, a man shall leave his father and mother, and does Jesus quote that verse? Can you get that text?
Now, what I see is actually since the Israelites, they always give importance to Moses. So that's why he's also referring to Moses.
No, actually, there's another reason why he's referring to Moses. Okay. Can we get that verse where Jesus is talking about marriage? 1 second. Somewhere in
Matthew 23.
Can you read it, Pastor? Jesus addresses marriage at several points. Matthew 19.
Matthew 19:5.
Yeah, let's just read that. It's very interesting. Okay. Now, when Jesus had finished these sayings, he went away from Galilee and entered the region of Judea beyond Jordan, and large crowds followed him, and he healed them there. And Pharisees came up to him and tested him, asking, is it lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause? He answered, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? Where is he going to? Can you tell me where he's going to? Genesis, Moses, that is Moses, and said, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate. They said to him, why then did Moses command one to give certificate of divorce and to send her away? He said to them, because of your hardness of your heart, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. From when? From beginning. Okay. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery. The disciples said to him, if such is the case of a man and with his wife, it is better not to marry. Can you see the angle that is coming? But he said to him, not every one can receive this thing, but only those whom it is given. But there are eunuchs who have been so from birth, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by men. Can you see some angles of intersex and LGBT coming angle here? Just work along. Don't go through into that. Eunuchs by men, and there are eunuchs who are being made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Let the one who is able to receive this receive it. This passage is wonderful when you want to discuss about homosexuality also. Jesus is actually addressing that here in some extent. Okay. Homosexuality, I'm talking about in talking about intersex primarily, which we call as transgender. Is not the right word to use the people. It is intersex is the right word. And you can see that there are some by birth. Okay. we have to address that in a different setting, and hopefully somebody will bring the topic and we will someday later argue on that. But now coming back to the idea of marriage, if Jesus says that if you, not only this time, another time also, I think about another story where he comes the same issue, he will tell them to refer to Moses. And that means to say, Jesus says, I have nothing further to teach because Moses has already taught it and I'm not changing anything. Marriage is as per Genesis chapter 1. And on the 6th day, God made family, not man. Do you agree? I know that we all would have a paradigm shift here at this point. On the 6th day, God made not man, family. How many of you would agree with me that he made family? If family is in the creation order, we cannot tamper with that. Now, Moses is giving license or divorce. It is to protect the woman. Because in that culture, a woman had no value. But if she carried a certificate of divorce, it would state that this is the reason, so that the woman would have a reasonably safe environment. So that is something to do. If you study their culture, you will understand why Moses gave that divorce certificate. But Jesus is saying that's not what it's all about. It is the hardness of your heart that actually causes these issues. Okay, and he refers to Genesis, the creation order, marriage. So if you were to go back to 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and then look at the text very interestingly, very deeply, and actually analyze it, Paul wouldn't teach against getting married because it was in the primary area of our life, which is designed by God that we should exist in marriage. We should live in marriage. We should experience life in marriage. Here, Paul is addressing widows, men and women. And Paul says, if that's the case, hey guys, why don't you stay like I am? I'm a guy who lost my wife and I've decided not to get married for the gospel's sake. Does that make sense?
I think this is correct, Pastor.
Does that change our entire paradigm? At least we could go through one paradigm shift today's session. Yes, what do you think? Others? All the dear young ones here. Pastor Lemu, what do you say? You agree with me in this? I mean, at least to a very...
Yeah. Yes, Dr. George. That makes a lot of sense.
So when you read 1 Corinthians 7, we need to see that there is something that the Corinthian church has written to him and he's writing it in that context. It had to do with widows, actually. It had to do with people who lost their wives and they had to remarry. And that was the issue there. The issue of temptation and these things. He says, okay, if you're overcome by temptation, get married, man.
Correct.
So he was talking also in the context of ministry. Ministry in that context where there was severe persecution, there was an anti-Christian movement, and in that context, you wouldn't be able to manage marriage. Again, instead of that, why don't you focus on the kingdom? As I am doing, he said. I just love it. I mean, I think will change the way we look at marriage. Okay, now coming back to Pastor Satish, I think we've done a pretty reasonably good justice to Paul's marital life. And once and for all delivered Paul from all the judgments that people have on him. Okay, good. So coming back to what Shubha was talking to us, I'm hoping that all of you have from Acts chapter 1 to Acts chapter 15 got the timeline, got the events that are progressing. You should have it in your mind always, what is happening in each chapter. So my suggestion would be to create a chart, like we have that chart done by that guy. What is that? What are the name of that cup? Hengel and Schwenner. That similarly, you can create a chart like this. I'll close with this, okay? Short session. And you can put this chart in your competency too. So that will really help the evaluator, the assessor, to kind of figure out that you have done good biblical theology. Okay, so you can do like this: Acts chapter 1, Acts 2, Acts 3, Acts 4, Acts 5, Acts 6, Acts 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and up to 15. So if you divide it nicely, then you can write timeline here. Okay, so you can put approximately times of these events, and you can see the main figure. Put the main figure in each of these chapters. Some of these chapters are transitional, so it will transition between Peter and Stephen and Paul. I mean, like that, it will transition, but there's no problem. If it is transition, you can put both the names. Then you can put the geography. You can tell about the geography. Now that you have seen the maps, the geography will make sense. And so you have timeline, you have main figure, and you have the geography. Then the main event. So you can do this as a chart of, you don't need to do a big chart like this. You can do it since we have 28 chapters, you can do it, rounding off to 30, you can do it 5, 5, 5, 5. Or you can do it with other marks, like the 6 blocks that we talked about, isn't it? But ideally, my suggestion would be, because we are all stuck in the chapter paradigm and the verse paradigm, because it is there right now, and we refer primarily to Bible from the chapter and verse paradigm. But the early church people did not have that. They did not have verses, right? There was no chapters. Chapters were put in the 12th century. Verses were put in the 16th century. Okay, so but for us, because we are so aware of the chapter verse paradigm, it's good to do it, Acts 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 in one. Then that means if you put it in landscape, your MS Word in landscape, and insert a tabular column, you can insert it and make it big and make it to a wonderful thing. And main events, you can say. And then you can talk about learning, primary learning, you can say. Okay, so you can write the primary learning that you got. So if you were to put it like this, first is the timeline, and then you wrote the main figure or the main heroes of the that particular chapter, the geography where it was happening, the events, the main events that happened, and you're learning there in short. I'm talking about, just 3 words, 4 words kind of a thing. You would get an excellent biblical theology perspective. Does that make sense? Now you can create this chart, and you can use that Engel and Schwenner's idea of creating that timeline chart. This would be a timeline chart. This would be an event chart. This would be the transition from different heroes. You would see then, if you can create all the 28 in one page, it's good, but it's very, very difficult. You won't be able to space it. But if you can do 10, 10 and 8 would be ideal. And you could put this print it and put it on your study area and put it across, that we can see the whole Acts 1 to 28 in one panoramic picture. Trust me, you would be better than a scholar. Can we do that? Would some of us be able to present that in the next class? Would that exercise really open your mind to see the Lucan intent in the whole Acts thing? By the way, we are very clear that you should have read the book of Acts completely through and through. You should have read Patzia. You should have watched the Bible Project outline videos, and you should have watched at least one movie. Preferably, you watch Peter and Paul or the Acts movie. This much you should have done. And if you can do this chart, it will additionally help you to make. And if you can really do a big, nice chart and stick it in your room, and you can all show us a picture of that, how it looks, it'll be really nice. It'll be very encouraging. And I assure you, if you do that exercise, which I told you now, you will never forget acts in your life. And I can wake you up from sleep and you can preach a sermon anytime. All right. Printo, if you're there, could you just pray and close?
Sure, Pastor. Loving Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Lord, for giving us this morning, Lord, to come together in your presence and to learn together, Father, Lord. Lord, as we are aligned with your word, Lord, you help us, Lord, to have our discipline and also to, Lord, to be faithful while studying these chapters and also to reflect it in our ministry, Father, Lord. And you help us, Lord, each and everyone, Lord, in following, Lord, your way, your path, Father, Lord, as well as to be faithful with the course which we have undertaken, Father, Lord. Lord, in the coming days, Lord, help us, Lord, to have more insight onto what we are learning and also to help us to build a strong foundation of our ministry, Father, Lord. Lord, submitting all those people, Lord, who were not able to attend today's class also in your mighty hands, Lord. You help them, you bless them, and also you help them to keep in track, Father, Lord. Surrendering all our prayer requests once again in your mighty hands, we give you glory, we give you honor. In Jesus' most precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
God bless you all. I'm hoping that all of you would read and come next time, so we can engage in discussion. Today, it was out of topic, but I think whatever Pastor Satish asked and we discussed, there was some engagement, and we could go through the process of paradigm shift. And at least I saw revival in Pastor Lemu coming onto video and speaking. I'm excited. Okay. All right. God bless you all.